Not long ago, I announced in a letter to the journal Plus and Minus that a new service was being inaugurated, to be known irreverently as the Canned Kitselman Round Robin Broadcasting Network. This is the first program of this new service, the CKRRBN. Last night, I made my first recording for this purpose. I was a little nervous, and I had intended to make only a test recording. But part of it turned out to be pretty good, so it remains as the other side of this tape. And this side is to be the first one played for reasons which will be given later. Now, what's the purpose of this tape broadcasting network? It is to facilitate communication and exchange of information in the field of personal integration. At the present time, I have in mind preparing 3 sets of tapes. The first, of which this is one, will be general, unrehearsed utterances on personal integration. The second will be a series of tapes consisting of a course in e-therapy with extended commentary. That will be an attempt to prepare a course on tape so that those who wish to start e-therapy classes and groups can do so with the canned lectures. The third series of recordings will be readings in the general field of integration, and in some cases, translations. That is, I will make an attempt to present this or that work by someone that has impressed me as having knowledge of integration. And I will endeavor as much as possible to present these works without mentioning their titles or authors until the reading is completed. There may be some discussion included, but the general idea is to present source material. In some cases, it will be source material that is not easily available in print. And those are the 3 series that I have in mind at the present time. Later, it is possible that there may be some tapes recorded on mathematical methods and other things of limited use. But at this time, I think these 3 programs will be sufficient for the purposes of this network. Now, I should like to point out that I record usually in the middle of the night, 1, 2, or 3 o'clock in the morning, being a night owl, and being by myself I may seem a little bit slow and dilatory. I talk much more rapidly with a group, and perhaps in time, if it is convenient, some of these may be recorded with a group present. In this first tape, I should like to tell something of the general field of integration, of what it consists, so that we will have a general idea of what it is that we are going to study. The general field of personal integration may be divided into 5 sections. This is a division that seems to arise out of natural law, you might say. It has been commented on in various ways by different teachers of integration for several thousand years. It is not original with me by any means, but I find it to be quite a sound classification, and I really think that these 5 sections will turn out to be separate dimensions of personal integration. That is, they will be independent of one another to some degree and independent directions of measurement. You may, if you like, call them A, B, C, D, and E therapy, because E therapy happens to coincide with the 5th of the 5. I didn't know that when I first began using the letter E, but I now see that it is true that E therapy would coincide with E in a classification A, B, C, D, and E. Now, what is A therapy? Well, there is a kind of a code phrase for it, which is good to remember, a memory aid. A therapy is the study and understanding of the slow mirror. The slow mirror. And I'll tell you what that is in just a moment. In A therapy, we are concerned with human conduct, actions and reactions. What is the cause and effect working of the personality insofar as matters of conduct are concerned? Is there such a thing as guilt? What is its nature? Is there such a thing as confidence, sense of achievement, pride, arising out of actions? What kinds of actions lead to what kinds of results? And so on. In physics, there is a law which states that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. It is a law which expresses a general idea of uniform reciprocity of things in the physical universe. It's a very useful law. It is a law expressing the idea of equilibrium, that all things are in equilibrium. Now, in personal relations, or in the operation of the person, this same law holds, but in a different way. It takes longer to work, because a person consists of a number of layers of metabolisms, you might say, causally related one to the other, and it takes some time before the effect appears. In Yellowstone National Park, there used to be a pool, a hot spring pool called the Handkerchief Pool. I don't think it operates anymore the way it used to, but if you were to drop a handkerchief, a dirty handkerchief, into that pool, the currents of water would cause it to go way down 15 or 20 feet or more into the depths of the pool and disappear. About 3 minutes later, the handkerchief would come to the surface, spotlessly clean, because of the boiling water. The handkerchief pool was a kind of a delayed reaction mechanism. So is the human person. Nevertheless, the law of physics, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, has its parallel in human functioning. In human functioning, we may say that every action has an equal and opposite reaction sooner or later. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction sooner or later. That is, everything we do reflects back to us in time. That is the slow mirror. Now, those who study actions and their consequences, up to the point of gaining a penetrating insight into this slow mirror of cause and effect, gain greatly by it. Not only do they free themselves of actions which may be so much lost energy, but they learn that a great many of the actions which they have been performing with a view to gaining certain ends are not practicable at all as means of gaining those ends. They learn which actions are unnecessary and drop them. Therapy, the study of the slow mirror, is a very interesting and productive study. And from time to time in these tapes, I shall endeavor to present some facet or other of it. Now, what is B therapy? B therapy is concerned with certain intensifications of experience which are possible to the individual. You might say that A therapy represents physical integration, since a person who understands A therapy may thus enhance his physical solidarity of position, his physical health. B therapy might be described as emotional integration, the science or art of happiness. Happiness has been defined as the intelligent mastery of pleasant emotions. Well, perhaps. But B therapy is concerned with the intensities of happiness. What are they? How are they attained? And there is a kind of a code phrase that can be used to describe this second section of the field of integration. The secret fire. The secret fire. Now, why is it called fire? Well, fire is a word that we use to mean the chemical process of oxidation and its accompanying radiant phenomena. And we also use it, and many peoples use it in many languages, to refer to intensity of emotion. We speak of the fire of passion, of a person being a firebrand, having a fiery disposition, fiery temper. Now, the fires of passion are not necessarily fires that represent heat, even though we do use that simile frequently. We say the heat of passion. We say man is hot-headed. When we say a person is a hothead, we do not necessarily mean that his temperature is higher than anyone else's. We are using terms which ordinarily relate to heat, temperature, with another meaning. And it is in the knowledge and understanding of those forms of experience which this other meaning applies to that we find the secret fire. Now, why secret? Well, to tell it from the other kind. Oxidation processes are not necessarily secret. But this other kind of fire can be experienced in full intensity without another person knowing about it. Just as we can send radio waves from one city to another without persons in between knowing about it. Likewise, this condition called fire is an intense happiness, among other things, which is our own personal secret. An intense physiological ecstasy, pleasure, which no one can know about except the person who experiences it. That is why it is called the secret fire. Now, just as the person who studies A therapy begins to learn about actions and reactions, and which are unnecessary, he learns to drop away those unnecessary actions. His health, general well-being are improved thereby. So also does the person who learns about fire, the secret fire, learn which things are opposed to that fire. And he learns to abandon those pursuits which prevent the experiencing of intense happiness. Now, for example, let me give you an illustration of the difference here. In A therapy, the slow mirror, let's consider the question, say, of smoking. Well, from the A therapy point of view, the person who understands conduct and the values of conduct, there's no harm in smoking. It is a pursuit, like many other pursuits. Doesn't particularly injure the individual. In excess, it might. Whether or not one should smoke in the presence of non-smokers, for it does give offense to some. A teacher of A therapy, therefore, a teacher of the slow mirror would say, be careful about giving offense through the habit of smoking. Outside of that, it doesn't matter much whether you do or you don't. That's up to you. But a teacher of B therapy, the secret fire, would say, smoking is a mild dissipation. And every bit of pleasure that you get from it is subtracted from your overall reservoir of possible pleasure, which is in your endocrine system, and it is thus not available for you when you wish to experience the more intense forms of happiness. You have only so much possibility of emotional experience of well-being, and you use some of it up when you smoke. And the same with other mild dissipations. In other words, a teacher of B therapy might say, everything you do for a lift lets you down. And he might go on to illustrate. Let's go back to Yellowstone Park. In Yellowstone Park, there is a law against putting soap into a geyser, because it was discovered years ago that if a geyser is not working too well and a quantity of soap is put into it, there is a chemical reaction that takes place that causes the geyser to become reactivated for a short time. But the geyser then sinks into a state worse than before, because the overall effect of the soap is detrimental. So it is an offense punishable by fine to put soap into a geyser. Well, when we smoke a cigarette or drink a cup of coffee, do something for a lift, entirely apart from food value or anything else, we do something just for a lift, we're putting soap into the geyser. So might the teacher of B therapy say. Now, of course, he would say, if you're not interested in the experiences of intense happiness, well, do what you please. But if that is what you are interested in, why, recognize these facts. One thing we can learn, by the way, from the teacher of B therapy in passing, is that if you meet an individual who claims to be living in a high state of emotional integration, experiencing intense happiness, states of concentration, so on and so forth, and that individual smokes and uses stimulants, it is very likely that that individual is either self-deceived or deceiving you. Because persons who have a high degree of emotional integration are enjoying such extraordinary health in their neuroendocrine system and other factors of their metabolism that they don't need any props, any lifts, any helps, and in fact find them distasteful. So, if you meet an individual who gives out that he's reached an advanced state of something or other, emotional, that is, and that individual lights one cigarette from another, or puffs contentedly at a pipe or a cigar, don't take him too seriously. Another thing important to know about the secret fire is that persons who achieve this wondrous higher metabolism of the neuroendocrine system develop tremendously heightened powers of the visual imagination, powers of visual imagery, to such a degree that in the very first of the states of fire, if you are enjoying such a state, such an experience, and you choose to imagine something, your visual imagery is so perfect that you cannot tell what you have imagined from the real thing. If you are looking at a lamp, for example, and you choose to imagine another lamp beside it, while in that first stage of fire, the only way you can tell the two apart and know which is the real one is to remember which one was there first. The power of visual imagery is thus heightened tremendously. I'm not talking from hearsay about this. I practiced yoga a number of years ago to such a point that I had the faculty. And this particular faculty is the reason why there is a traditional saying among teachers of yoga systems, which are, after all, bee therapy systems of a sort. Yoga systems all emphasize the fact that you should not study yoga without a teacher. Why not? Because a teacher can tell you when you are being fooled by your own visual imagery, perhaps subconsciously motivated, and when not. I have known a good many people who have achieved some degree of emotional integration, but who did not understand this principle very well. And for them, the old adage, seeing is believing, was still in use. And these people have become quite deluded. They have begun to live in private worlds. If it occurs to one of them that 2 plus 2 is 5 in this wondrous state of fire, even though the thought is twisted and distorted, it is experienced at the same time as this wondrous feeling of fire, ecstatic happiness, intensity of experience. And when you point out that 2 plus 2 is 4, they look at you with superior condescension and say, well, that's your reality. Once you enter into the possession or attainment of fire, if you do not have a properly developed critical faculty enabling you to not get too excited about visual imagery, you get into trouble. You enter cloud cuckoo land. You become a more or less harmless nut. You have delusions, hallucinations. And they're quite real to you. But because you do not realize that when one is experiencing fire, seeing is not necessarily believing, you make the mistake of accepting what you see, which may have been produced by your own subconscious, as being real. One of the classical examples in history is that of Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church. Joseph Smith was a young man of deep religious feeling, and deep religious discontent. He led a pure life. avoided dissipation. His neuroendocrine system got into such excellent health that he began to experience the ecstatic states of fire. And while in this condition, he saw an angel. An angel appeared to him and showed him plates on which were written, golden plates on which were written and engraved the words of the Book of Mormon. Now, I don't doubt in the least that Joseph Smith saw the angel and the plates. I don't doubt that. Several of his other acquaintances, young men like himself, who also were living in fire, they saw the angel too. And I don't doubt that one or more of them may have done so. But the question is, was the angel a genuine angel with an existence apart from them? Or was the angel the projection of their own minds? That is the kind of question that is very difficult to solve. And as long as you consider it a difficult question to solve, you have a critical faculty which keeps you from being deluded. But if you consider the question trivial and say, why, of course they saw an angel, or why, of course they didn't, then you have blocked yourself. And your integration in the B therapy direction will be impeded. So, B therapy, then, is the study and understanding of the secret fire, which is a name for the highest experiences, the most intense experiences of human happiness. Now, what is C therapy? Well, just as A therapy may be called physical integration, and B therapy may be called emotional integration, C therapy may be called mental integration. And there is a special phrase describing it. It is the safe place. The safe place. Look at the world around you. Is there any real security anywhere? Look at any object, any feeling, any idea, any activity, any thought, and ask yourself, is this secure or insecure? Permanent or changeable? Stable and reliable or subject to change without notice? Well, if you look far enough, you will see that all phenomena are insecure. And then you can ask yourself, with regard to any and all phenomena, take one at a time, if you like, and ask this question. Is insecurity pleasant or unpleasant? Well, the way we experience it, it's unpleasant. We do not enjoy insecurity. So, we must answer that question for any one phenomenon, for anything, that insecurity is not pleasant. Now, in relation to this same phenomenon, we ask a third question. That which is insecure, unstable, unreliable, subject to change without notice, and which, because of its insecurity, is unavoidably unpleasant sooner or later. Is such a thing worth claiming, owning, identifying with? It's a very serious question. At the moment, I'm looking at my right foot. Now, my right foot, is that secure or insecure? Well, it's insecure. Is insecurity pleasant or unpleasant? It's unpleasant. Yet that insecurity is bound up with my right foot. Therefore, this right foot here, which is insecure, and which has an unpleasantness bound up with that insecurity, is unsatisfactory, in other words, unavoidably unsatisfactory. Is it worthwhile to own that, claim it, cling to it, build upon it, make expectations about it, count upon it, rely on it? Is it wise to do that? No, it isn't. Because if I do that, and something happens to that right foot, I experience suffering. I grieve, lament, beat my breast, and so forth. But if, on the other hand, I make no point of owning that foot, I observe that there's a foot there, but I don't have expectations that I may have it forever. I might walk downtown and lose it tomorrow, some accident. If I don't cling to it too much, and I thoroughly realize in advance that it is a perishable thing, then someday, when it changes, becomes different, I'm not upset. I don't suffer. I don't experience grief. I don't lament, beat my breast, and tear my hair. Now, there's something quite curious here. We've got kind of three lines of thought, three observations, you might say. All phenomena are insecure. Insecurity is not pleasant. What is insecure and necessarily unpleasant is not worth owning. Now, suppose we follow that to its conclusion and we endeavor to reduce the tendency on our part to cling to things or own things in all directions. Mind you, we're not advocating disowning, say, wife and home and entering a monastery. We disown the monastery, too. We disown in all directions, impartially. And that means we don't have to leave wife and home or anything. It isn't translatable in specific actions. It is simply that we reduce our tendency to own things, to cling to them, to identify, to expect certain things. But what happens when we get rid of all our expectations, of all our reliance upon perishable things, people, ideas? Well, it may sound surprising, but we stop suffering. Because suffering of any kind, mental suffering, that is, you can always burn your finger, I suppose, as long as we have fingers. But mental suffering is a consequence of clinging, owning, expecting something, and then getting something else. Expecting permanence, reliance, stability in things. And we don't get it. It isn't to be had. So we suffer. But without changing the world in any way, without changing our conduct, if we simply reduce and remove this tendency to own things, to cling to things, we remove the possibility of experiencing grief, hatred, fear. We remove the possibility of unhappiness. Now, it isn't as easy as that. It's not an easy thing to do. But the great teachers of integration have taught that it is possible by this method of examining phenomena, things physical, emotional, and mental, and relationships, determining whether or not they are secure or insecure, whether or not they are unpleasant in the long run or not, whether or not one should cling to them or own them, that it is possible in a space of 7 years' time, down to 7 days' time, depending on the individual, to become fully integrated, to remove all identifications, to become free from unhappiness, permanently free from unhappiness. I know some people who I think have done so. I've known them for a long time, watched them carefully. I think they've done so. Now, this C therapy is known as the safe place because only in such freedom is there security and safety. This physical body is perishable. There's no possible security for a perishable thing. But freedom from identifications, freedom from clinging, the absence of clinging, is not a thing. It is not perishable. It's an absence of something which once was but isn't there anymore. So that is what C therapy is. It has another name in my little e-book. It is called E-. C therapy and E- are one and the same. And it is the central and most important of the 5 sections of personal integration. E- is simply its name in relation to E therapy. It's how you can integrate yourself, whether you have an E to help you or not. And it certainly wasn't invented by me. No, indeed. There are excellent texts of C therapy or E minus. Well, I know of one 3,200 years old. An excellent text. 1250 BC. Now, what is D therapy? Well, D therapy is concerned with the development of the powers of the mind. Some of those powers are analytical and rational. Some of them seem to be psychic, extrasensory powers. But in D therapy, we are concerned with the deliberate cultivation of such powers. In 1950, a form of D therapy appeared by the name Dianetics. That's a coincidence, since that word also begins with D. Dianetics was a deliberate attempt, that is, as of 1950. It's changed its form many times since. But the Dianetics of 1950 was a method of coaxing one of the extrasensory faculties into operation, the faculty of recall, the power to recall as if re-experiencing former events. There are others who have methods of developing clairvoyance, clairaudience, telepathic sensitivity, and other faculties, telekinesis. All of that comes under the heading of D therapy. In other words, if you are going after some power of the mind, whether it be skill in making mathematical proofs or skill in reading the minds of others, that's D therapy. The deliberate cultivation of special powers of the mind. I don't comment on it at length, not because there isn't a lot to be said, but because the powers of the mind are so many and diverse that it is quite a lengthy subject. And it will be dealt with from time to time in the course of these tapes. Now, the last of the five, E therapy, I've already written a little book on, which many of you have. But I'd like to say something in general about it here. E therapy, well, let's go back to the beginning. A therapy is physical integration. B therapy is emotional integration. C therapy is mental integration. D therapy might be described, though it isn't quite exact, as psychic integration. What would we call E therapy? Well, I don't like to use a word like spiritual integration, but it might be called that. Because just as D therapy is the development of special powers of the mind, E therapy is the encouragement and manifestation of the highest part of the mind, which acts almost like a universal mind. We don't seem to be able to tell whether there's one E or many, because E, as contacted in any individual, seems to know so much that it's almost as if it were a universal mind. It appears to be a well-nigh omniscient mind. So E-therapy is contacting the teacher, the healer, within. Whereas D-therapy is the contacting of the sense of clairvoyance, telepathic sensitivity, and so forth, specific things within. But in E-therapy, we're not concerned with the specific things as ends in themselves. We're concerned with contacting the source of wisdom within. This intelligence within may be named in many different ways. Just this evening, in reading Time magazine, I found in an article on Louis Braille, the inventor of the Braille system of printing for the blind, that on his deathbed, this is the remark he made. "Oh, unsearchable mystery of the human heart," he said to a friend, "I am convinced that my mission on earth is accomplished." Braille died long before his system became well known, but it did become well known after his death. Now, what did he mean when he said, "Oh, unsearchable mystery of the human heart"? Well, we have a name for it. We call it E. And some of us talk about E so much you might think we knew something about it. But we don't. There's a very fine book by a man named Talbot Mundy called I Say Sunrise. His name for E is the wisdom that dwells within us. What is wisdom? Well, not so easy to say. But there is something in us which is wise. From a materialistic point of view, maybe it's just the 95% of the brain that isn't ordinarily used. But it's there, and in 2 out of 3 of us, it can be called upon and will go to work without difficulty. In 1 out of 3, it needs a little help to get started. Well, now let me summarize. In A therapy, we are concerned with actions and their consequences, with the slow mirror of cause and effect. In B therapy, we are concerned with fire and its attainment, with the intense experiences of high happiness, the secret fire. In C therapy, we are concerned with identifications, how to remove them, and thus finding the safe place. In D therapy, we're concerned with the special faculties of the mind, intellectual and psychic, how to develop them for special purposes. Oh, I forgot to mention the code name for D therapy. It is the arsenal. The arsenal. Because the various faculties of the mind are the arsenal of creative persons. They are the powers, the weapons with which creative individuals down through history have won their battles. E therapy is concerned with contacting the wisdom that dwells within. That wisdom sometimes turns on some of these other faculties or lends them because the wisdom has them. But in E therapy itself, we are concerned only with approaching that wisdom, which is called E. Now, What is the code name for that? It is the treasure. For certainly E is the treasure within us. The 95% of the brain that we don't use, if you want to call it that. Maybe it is something more wonderful. The Holy Spirit. The Messiah, the Father within. Or, as people of other faiths would say, the Prajna, Sri Krishna, the Lord within, the Tao, whatever it may be. It is a wonderful mystery. It is, as Louis Braille said, the unsearchable mystery of the human heart. So those are the 5 sections to be found in the field of personal integration. In these coming recordings, I may or may not refer to them by name. It is sufficient for you to know them and understand the difference between them. Because after all, integration is one large subject. And to know something about one of these 5 sections of the field helps one to grow in the others. They're all interrelated, and yet they do appear to be, to some degree, independent of one another. Now, I'd like to say something at this point about the manner in which this canned Kitselman round-robin broadcasting network is going to operate. In the first place, this isn't being done to make money. I make money sometimes when I lecture, sometimes when I do therapy. I make enough. And one of the things that Talbot Mundy teaches in his book, I Say Sunrise, is that whereas most of us are concerned with, so far as money is concerned, we're concerned with getting more, that it is wise to be concerned with getting enough. And I get enough. I'm not anxious for more. So, these tapes are going to be made available at cost to any who want them. And the cost is $3.30 per tape. That's 2 hours of recording. Plus $1.25 is what it costs us to have them duplicated. So the price will be around $4.55. Something like that. Write in and find out if you wish to buy them. And that is taking advantage, of course, of the wholesale price of the tapes. Now, on the other hand, the round-robin part comes this way. Instead of paying out $4.55 for a lecture that may be useful to listen to once, those who wish to will be able to have these lectures come to them once a week so that they can play them for a group at a cost of $1 per reel per week. In other words, if you want a reel to come to you each week, outside of the postage, it will cost you $1. And you either return the reel after you've used it or send it on to the next person in the round-robin chain. In that way, we'll be able to take in enough to replace the tapes when they become worn from use, and perhaps to have more tapes prepared. But it's not being done to make anyone any money. Now, tapes which travel at 3 3/4 inches per second and use 7-inch spools, or I should say machines which work with such tapes, are the most common of all. We can have these lectures recorded for you on wire or on tapes with other speeds if you so desire. But the round-robin networks will be 7-inch spools recorded at a speed of 3 3/4 inches per second, which makes it 1 hour in each direction on the spool. And most machines do that. Now, those of you that may not have a machine, we have found that there are machines for playback only. They do not record, that can be had for $90 or less. And they can be purchased on time, and it amounts to about, $20 down and $6 a month. And we have no part in that. It's just that we've tried to find out how to get them inexpensively, and we'd be very glad to give you facilities, or I should say give you information as to how to get your tape playback machine. I think it would probably be prohibitive to record these tapes on disc records, except possibly some of the long-playing records, I don't know. But they're available at whatever the commercial price is for copying to all those who want them. There's no copyright. They're free of charge. Everything is being done just exactly at cost. And I hope that those of you who are interested, perhaps in having a meeting or group of your own, meet in your home, might decide to take advantage of this system in order to have a canned lecture available each week. As I put it in this letter not long ago, if you would like to have a group meet in your home or somewhere interested in personal integration, but you don't feel quite up to making an ass of yourself as a speaker, why, let me do that for you. Save yourself the trouble. I was vaccinated with a phonograph needle and run off at the mouth endlessly once started. And some of this material, information, is of use. So if you'd like to have it, why, please write in and tell others who may be interested, because we're really going to try to make an educational series of tapes in the field of personal integration. I should say even more important than educational, integrative. Because we can be educated and not be integrated at all. But when we're integrated, we're really going somewhere. We're concerned with personal transformation, evolution, transcending our limitations. And I personally think it's a worthwhile endeavor. And that's why I find it pleasing to put in my time doing such things as this. Now, on the other side of this tape is the first recording I made in this series. I mentioned it briefly at the beginning of this side. I'd like to say a few words about it. It consists of a poem by a friend of mine, a man named Lloyd Sullivan, that I happened to pick up, rather thought-provoking. So I read it into this recording. This man Sullivan once sent me the most remarkable postcard I think I've ever received. The only message on it was, "Are we people or are we sheeple?" I've often wondered about that. The second item is a bit of fiction that I happened to see in a magazine the other day. Not terribly well written. Even got some bad grammar in it. But I've got some bad grammar in me, so I read it. I was practicing with the recorder to see how my voice would sound. And then, in order to see how I would sound extemporaneously, I went on and commented on this piece of fiction that had attracted my attention. And the comment is very slow. It's kind of a meditation or a soliloquy. Even slower than this rate of delivery. And I suggest that you relax and sit back and listen, kind of meditate on it. See how it goes.